Folks, welcome to another episode of the Noble Man Podcast. I am grateful that you continue to tune in and join us in our journey of meeting guests, men and women, who are helping us understand how to help churches reach and build men, how to equip churches as they disciple men. So we have as our guest today, Matthew Efird. Matt is, he's written a book about a particularly challenging season in his life and his family's life. And I got to know him some time ago and just grateful that he's willing to share his time. So Matt, welcome to the Noble Man Podcast.
Mike, man, it's truly my honor. Thank you so much for having me.
It's great fun. Now, listen, you are in a particular part of the country where you went to college, and you are a rabid fan. So give us the lowdown about your where you are, why you're there, and just that whole piece because it's fun.
Matthew Efird, I'm unapologetically a follower of Jesus Christ. Outside of my decision to follow the Lord, my best decision I ever made was marrying my high school sweetheart, Hannah. We have 4 amazing boys, an 8-year-old, would-be 6-year-old, 5-year-old, and 3-year-old. We live just outside of Athens, Georgia. We both went to school at UGA. Go Dogs. We love this university. We love this area, this part of the country. I grew up in the Georgia area, in the North Georgia mountains, and came to school at UGA and just never kind of left. So we've been around this area for a long time now.
That's what tickles me so much is the UGA thing, man. The Georgia Bulldog fans are they are big time into it. As a matter of fact, my middle son and his wife are visiting us right now at our home, and he's an Alabama fan. She's a Georgia fan from a big family of Georgia fans, and it's tough around there during football season.
It is. Yeah, that's a good rivalry. My dad is a Georgia Tech alumni, and we always say that Thanksgiving would be difficult if they were better, but thankfully they're not. So Thanksgiving's pretty easy for us. But no, that we love the university as our family's grown, as our businesses have grown. My involvement, my enjoyment of a Saturday morning has dwindled definitely. But there was a time, when we were at the University of Georgia, we were real involved in a campus ministry called the BCM, Baptist Collegiate Ministries. And on site there, I want to say, Mike, it's been going on something like 20 years now. I was there. I was on the team almost 15 years ago now. And when we were on site there, the guys that paint their chest red, spells out Georgia Dogs, the red wigs and silver glasses. I was part of that. And it was just an outreach of the campus ministry to say, hey, we can love Jesus and love the Bulldogs, and we can be rabid fans and also keep our faith and our testimony and enjoy a game and enjoy it in a way that's honoring to God. So it was a fun experience. I enjoyed doing that a lot, but I definitely don't do that anymore, but any standpoint.
Okay, so Matt, I need to capitalize on something right there. You just said that you were good, godly Christian young men who were painted up with the wigs on, the glasses and everything. And there are probably some parents out there who need to hear that those guys weren't heathens or pagans, and that you can go to college and you can have that much fun and still love Jesus. And so I think that's just straight up awesome. And some parents probably need to hear that.
So while we were at the University of Georgia, as part of the Paint Line, so you can follow them on social media. I think it's Paint Line or Paint Line Squad, something like that. Yeah. At this point, again, it's been a number of years since I was there. Some of our friends at LSU, we got to know them through this kind of community that we were building. They were painted and they had small crosses on their chest, kind of on their collarbone. And LSU at the time had gone through and taken a picture of them and then edited out the cross. And we said, yeah, that's not okay. So that was the first change that they had made to the paint line in about 10 years. We actually added in the cross to say, hey, we want to be overly clear of why we're here and what we're doing. That this is not something, none of us are own anything. We're not intoxicated.
Right.
We're all going to go and, some of us are going to go back to the BCM after this. Some of us are going to go to Chili's and hang out with a group of guys. We just want to be in community with fellow brothers, enjoying things that God has blessed us with.
I love that. Well, that's going to give me renewed interest in watching for the paint line at the Bulldogs games when I'm watching them this year. So that's great fun. Well, let me get to something that is in line with what we want to talk about. You and I connected through a mutual friend who recommended that we meet each other. And you have written a book. The title of it is Even Though We Will, about a particular experience that you and your wife had. And there was a hint of this even in your introduction when you said we're the parents of, I think, 3 boys, right?
4. So we have 4 sons.
4.
Yeah.
The 4th son came. And so go back and tell us about that and why you wrote this book. Kind of give us the story about Noah Clifton.
Sure. So our second son, Noah, the way I do this in a description, right, as I say, we have 4 sons, an 8-year-old, a would-be 6-year-old, a 5-year-old,
right.
3-year-old. And really that kind of gives me a door in. If somebody wants to ask some additional questions, like, hey, yeah, I'd love to tell you about my son, Noah. Sometimes people are standoffish. Grief, loss, specifically child loss, is really difficult to talk about in a lot of times, a lot of arenas. So it's just a way for us to acknowledge him and honor him while also not beating people over the head with it, right? But our second son, Noah, in September of 2019, we had one son at home. He was 18 months old, went to a routine doctor's appointment. The ultrasound, they found some abnormalities. Doctor comes in, tells us in that small room that several of your audience have sat in the room like that, waiting for news that they didn't know was coming. And she came in and said, Matthew and Hannah, there's some abnormalities on your ultrasound. And the thickness on the back of his neck, there's a big medical term, I don't remember it, just being real honest, but
right.
This part of the neck was thicker than it should have been. Mm-hmm. When they see that outside of a certain range, it's a telltale sign of a trisomy diagnosis. So trisomy, when you think about gene splitting, there's 26 chromosomes. There should be 1 and 1. 1 from mom, 1 from dad. They connect. Right. That's how, we make these incredibly unique blessings from God. And our son, Noah, had trisomy, so he had 3 chromosomes, and his was a 13th. So he had 13 chromosomes of all of his genes. And that is a lethal diagnosis. Mm-hmm. The most common one that people are familiar with is trisomy 21, which is Down syndrome. Right. That can be a lethal diagnosis. Normally it's not. It's a life-changing diagnosis. But trisomy 13 is a lethal diagnosis. So we were 12 weeks into the pregnancy, learned that he had a lethal diagnosis. They asked us at that time, back in 2019 in Georgia, they asked us at our practice, would you like to keep the pregnancy or do you want to end the pregnancy? And Hannah and I looked at each other and said, our convictions help determine the actions that we have. And so our personal conviction is life happens at conception. So no, we were not going to terminate that pregnancy. We wanted to continue that pregnancy. No matter what happened, we believed that pregnancy was a gift from God. And so we were going to try to honor him in that way, honor our eventual son. And that way we didn't know he was a son at that time. We said, no, we're going to keep the pregnancy. And so fast forward almost 6.5 months later, our son's born March 7th. And he passes on March 9th. So we got about 57 and a half hours on this side of eternity with him.
So there's so much to unpack here, but one of the things that hits me is you said he was born on March 7th.
Yeah.
You had 57 and a half hours with him. As I recall, this was 2020, right?
Yeah.
On March 13th of 2020, the world was shutting down with COVID. And so you guys were dealing with an incredibly challenging scenario for your family, and you were getting ready to be forced also into isolation with COVID. And I just think, I don't remember figuring that out when we spoke last. So that was kind of a double whammy. My goodness.
So it's kind of amazing. There's a chapter later in the book where we talk about God's perfect timing, and we had the opportunity to have our son. He was due later in March. He was due a couple of weeks later in March, and by having him delivered on the morning of March 7th, all of our friends got to come that we wanted to have there. All of our family got to come. Our pastor, like our community, those that had been walking alongside us for years, got to come and spend time with us in the hospital.
Wow.
We left on March 9th, the evening of March 9th. And then on the 10th or the 11th, the hospital in Athens shut down. Like locked down because of COVID, no visitors, no guests, no nothing. As in normal pregnancies, like dad's not in the room when baby's delivered. So the experience that we had, like hindsight's always 2020, but there is so much that we have learned of God's mercy in the midst of our suffering. Like Mike, we serve a good God. We do. And I unapologetically proclaim that. We serve a merciful God because he gave us that time. We learned in September of 2019 that this diagnosis, he's probably not going to be born alive. He's probably not going to make it to term. It's probably going to be a stillbirth if the pregnancy even makes it close enough to kind of consider it a stillbirth. And that's kind of what we were walking into. We were going to weekly, sometimes multiple times in a week, doctor's appointments, different specialists that we're meeting with to make sure that Hannah was okay, that our son Noah was okay, as best we could understand what was progressing in his diagnosis. They were seeing things like massive hole in his heart, underdeveloped lungs, issues with his kidneys, issues with the backside of his brain. It was not completing. The back part of the cranial was not closing. There was a big hole. All of these things that were pointing to, hey, this is, if he's born alive, the chances of you having any kind of time with him is very slim. And so we had prayed thousands of times for God to heal our son. And we prayed that, and we prayed that, and we prayed that. And we prayed with expectation that God could do a miracle with the circumstances, the reality of the diagnosis. We were living in that, understanding that, okay, God, I know you can choose to do a miracle if you choose to, but the information I have right now shows me that you're not choosing to. So I'm going to accept that as best I can in this moment. We're going to navigate that as best we can. And on March 7th, he was born. Very quick delivery. We left out of the house early that morning, had a friend come over, watch our son. Noah was almost born in the truck. It's kind of crazy. We get to the emergency room. There's a spot right at the front of the hospital, which never happens, right? We get parked. We get inside. Like 15 minutes later, I'm holding him. So very, very fast. My wife's a rock star. She's amazing. Just a kind of crazy experience. And initially, he's very blue. He's not breathing, underdeveloped lungs, issues in his heart. And we're kind of preparing ourselves and accepting like he's passed. And both of us are crying. Nurses are doing the best they can to take pictures and care for us, care for Noah, care for Hannah. And then he cries. And this glorious cry breaks forth.
Wow.
And the overwhelm of my son is here. I get to meet him on this side of eternity. In the midst of the suffering, there was so much hope that we felt in that moment. I write about the difference in peace and joy, right? And the perspective of we weren't happy.
Right.
We were in no way happy in this moment. But the peace of God that surpasses all understanding was in the midst of us there. And there was this undergirth of we're okay. We're not okay, but we're okay. right? Like we have the presence of our Savior in and with us. And we know that one day we will be able to see this son of ours again. As David said, I will not return. He will not return to me. I will return to him. And the timing of it being right there at COVID, back to your original question, ramble a little bit, apologize. The COVID conversation, I can still remember friends coming to the hospital to see us. And one of them very sweetly said, "Hey, I just want you to know, like, there's this thing going on out in the world, and I got you some toilet paper." I'm like, that's weird. Like,
the
why
gift
do we
of
need
Charmin.
toilet paper? The gift of Charmin. It's like, okay.
Yeah.
And so our son passes. We go. We've got some friends that have a lake house up on one of the lakes here in Georgia, and we went and spent a few days there. Hannah and I did together. And just tried to reconnect and have some time to start healing. And we came back home still not really knowing anything about COVID. And then we kind of started hearing from friends, started hearing about churches going to be shut down for a couple of weeks, slow the curve, all those things, slow the spread. And Mike, what it did for us is it gave Hannah and I an excuse to be together.
Yes.
And to intentionally spend time, just she and I and our oldest son, Walker. Like, it almost forced us into, hey, we're going to have to work through some stuff.
Right.
Like, we can't, we're not numbing this. We're not avoiding each other. I'm not throwing myself back into work. You're not throwing yourself back into serving. Like, we're gonna have to force ourselves to acknowledge what we've just walked through, and the cloud of the fog of grief that we're in. That we're gonna have to work through this together.
So that's just a lot to walk through as a young husband and wife. Matthew, how old were you at the time, and how long had you guys been married?
Yeah, so at the time of Noah's passing, I was 29.
Okay.
And we had been together for 9 years.
Okay.
And we had been married for almost 6.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
And it was just one of those, like, I'm a young dad. I'm a young business leader. I'm serving at our church. I was a bivocational pastor at the time. And it was, when we looked around our friend group, our community, we have mentioned the BCM, love the BCM, love the ministry there they do on campus, been there for a long time. They continue to do incredible work. When we were there was 300 or 400 people a part of that ministry, and we got close with most of them. The University of Georgia is massive, and
Sure.
I come from a small mountain town. I graduated with like 130 people, so I was going into classes where I had 3 times that, right? So my
UGA
college
was culture
campus,
shock for you.
it was a culture shock, yeah. But it was encouraging to find community. So that community became our friends. It became, we were in their weddings, they were in our wedding. It was people married, friend. It was just a sweet community, a sweet time in our life. And so we similarly got married in similar stages of year, started having kids around the same time.
Right.
Mike, we looked around our friends when we learned of our diagnosis in September of 19. Like, what do we do? Mm-hmm. Like, all that I knew going into that appointment, this was our second ultrasound appointment for that pregnancy. All that I knew was that you look for a heartbeat. Like, as long as there's a heartbeat, you're good. And we saw that heartbeat, and we're like, great, we're good. Good, strong heartbeat. And then the abnormalities come into play. And we look around our friend group and we're like, there's no framework of how to walk through this, right? There's no playbook. At the time, there was not a lot of resources, especially Christian. We wanted to find something biblically based that was, hey, here's how you can walk through grief. So Hannah found a book that was by a mom that was real popular at that time that helped her a lot walk through part of her journey to give language around some of the things that she was feeling. I didn't feel the same way. I read the same book. It was a great book, but I just didn't feel quite the same way. And so it was impactful to me to understand more of her, but it didn't really help understand more of me. And so what I started doing, what I learned throughout Noah's life that I still implement today is when I'm in a season of grief, I have to write and I have to move. I have to do both of those things. That's the way that I start processing. So for the first time in my life, Mike, I stood on many stages and said, it's okay to not be okay, but it's not okay to stay that way, which is true. Yeah. It's okay to not be okay. For the first time in my life, I was not okay.
Yeah.
There was something within the core of who I was that was breaking apart, that emotions were welling up inside of me, that we call it the fog of grief, right? We walked through that 6.5 month period of anticipatory grief. So we're grieving his diagnosis while he's still here. And then he's born, we celebrate his birth, and then 2 days later he passes. So now we actually start grieving the passing of our son. And all through that season, God has wired me as a visionary. That's just who I am. I run that for my businesses. When I speak, I'm a rose-colored glasses. I'm an eternal optimist. That's just how I'm wired.
Right.
In this season, thinking about the future, I didn't have a clue. Like little decisions started to become somewhat overwhelming. It was, I don't know what we're going to do in business. I don't know what we're going to do for lunch tomorrow. Like, what are we going to do for lunch today? Right? Some of those little decisions become really, really challenging and deeply mind-numbing to get there. It's odd. And so I found that some of those feelings, emotions that were coming up, bubbling up outside of me, when I would write them, this is just me, this is my journey.
Yeah.
When I would write them down, they were not as scary as they were when they just stayed in my head. For whatever reason, they felt like they had more power or strength over me. But when I actually got them and wrote them down and acknowledged the way I was feeling, some of that hold started to weaken. That was my experience. And then I had to move, and I had to consistently move. I needed to get around the house, out of the house. I couldn't just sit. There's a time and a place to be still and know that I'm God. And there's a time and a place to move and to know that God has wired us uniquely and to be in tune with what he's had. So I didn't start out with the intentions of writing a book. I started journaling, and then we started sharing some snippets of the journal that was kind of an overall update. Because we had people all over the country through different organizations we were part of that had shared this message, that were praying for us and wanting updates. And those were shared. Those were getting shared with other people that were walking through similar journeys. And then I would start getting phone calls. This is, months and years after Noah passed. It got to the point to where almost monthly, Mike, I'd get a phone call. Hey, Matthew, I've got this friend.
Right.
They just got this diagnosis. Would you be willing to talk to him? Absolutely. I'd be honored to. Get on the phone, hear their story, share our story, ask some questions, share some advice, answer some questions they may have. And then without fail, the call would end with, hey, do you have anything you can send me? Like, this is great. This has been helpful. I want my spouse. I want my wife, my husband, my mom, my dad, my son, my best friend. I want my pastor. I want somebody else to hear this. And I got really tired of saying no. So a few years after Noah had passed, I kind of collected it together. And I said, I think I'm going to publish this. And I never got a piece about it. And so I put it on a shelf. And I say, okay, God, I don't know what you're going to do in and through me, but obviously there's part of this story that you still need to work in my heart. And it took until almost 6 years for me to say, okay, God, I feel like this is time for me to share. And so the book is broken up into 3 sections. The first section is Noah's story. So it's the way that we navigated marriage,
Right.
child loss, the hospital visits, all of those different parts of the pregnancy that we were trying to articulate the way they were feeling. So I wanted to hopefully give other men in my life a voice to some of the things they may be feeling.
Right.
And then second to that, speak into the wives and say, hey, I don't speak for all men, but this may help you like that book helped me understand my spouse better. Maybe this book will help you understand your spouse a little bit better. So that's the first part. The second part is how I wrestled with God. This was not just we're going to put our Sunday school answer on and say all is well. We're gonna wrestle a little bit. We're gonna wrestle a lot, and we're going to question. We're gonna read. We're gonna go back to what Scripture says, and we're gonna try to pull out some truth to say, how do I navigate this kind of loss? So that's part 2, and then part 3 is what we call the community manual, and it's really just what I wished my friends and family and church group would have known before I walked through that journey. So this kind of became the book to say, if I was walking through a season of grief, if I was trying to prepare before a season of grief, what would I want to know? And that was the story.
Well, I appreciate you talking about the 2 things in particular that helped you writing and moving. I've interviewed another guy on the podcast whose wife passed, and his grief was given outlet through writing journal articles that eventually became a blog that has blessed a lot of people and now is getting moved to a book. So it's interesting how the Lord uses that. The movement thing, just getting out to relieve some of that stress and that energy is another huge factor that guys need to hear and may be a blessing to them. And I love what you said about there's a time to be still and know God, but there's also great value in being out in creation and knowing God in that context as well. So I want to hit a couple of things here. That the image on the front of the book is an ark, and you guys use the metaphor of the ark. Or the story of Noah and the ark. Obviously, your son's name was Noah. And so you use the ark as a way to communicate how the Lord bore you through this whole process. So tell me a little bit about that symbolism and what it represents to you and how you invite other people to encounter Jesus in that. Honestly, that's a big deal.
So our when we learned the confirmation of his diagnosis, so we had to get genetic testing, that ultrasound appointment back in September of 19. About 10 days later, we got confirmation that he had trisomy 13. And we decided that time, we said, we're going to determine the words that we speak over ourselves, that we're going to be walking through this season together. We're going to choose to lean into one another, not lean away. That's in our marriage and that's in our faith. So we came up with, from the story of Job, even though we will. And it's when Job, through all of his suffering, right, says, even though you slay me, yet will I praise you. You see, Mike, 9 years before this, when I was going to college, my dad had given me a 1-year Bible. And he said, if you want to know the Lord, read his word. Which he had heard that when he was in college, when he was with Dr. Charles Stanley. And he said, if you want to know the Lord, read his word. And so I saw that modeled all throughout my life.
Right.
I cannot tell you the number of times I came downstairs, my dad's sitting in his chair with a cup of coffee reading his Bible. Still to this day, he does that. That I would have friends come over in middle school and high school and even in college, and they knew that about my dad. They knew that my mom was in Bible study. They knew that my mom was in community. Both of them were living out their faith in not just a Sunday time. That impacted all of their life. So I came from that kind of upbringing. And then I'm in college. I have disappointments come up in college, and I remember reading through, 9 times through Scripture at this point when we get this diagnosis, and I think back on Job and his life because I thought back in college when I first read that, and I thought, wow, what amazing faith! Like what unbelievable trust and faith that Job had to be able to say that. And I wonder if I would have the same faith. And fast forward 9 years forward, at that moment, I did not feel that. But I was determined to speak that. I was determined to say, our family slogan became, even though we will. Even though we walk through the valley of shadow of death, we will fear no evil. That's the book title, right. Even though we will. That's you can, there's keynotes I give on this. It's the perspective of, I want to determine the words that I speak over myself, and I'm going to speak truth over myself.
Right.
That my circumstances have changed, but God's character has not. He's the same today as he was yesterday, as he will be tomorrow. And so we're going to continue to lean into that and trust him in that. Noah in the ark, after we got the genetic testing back, we also learned that he was a boy. Mm-hmm. So we named him Noah. Noah in the Old Testament means rest. It means finding rest, ultimately finding rest in the midst of a storm, right? And I love so much about the story of Noah and the ark. Mm-hmm. God inspired Noah to build the ark before the storm, not in the storm, right? I think that's very important. So I look back on my foundation in Scripture and in faith. I look back on date nights that Hannah and I had gone to when everything was great. All of the time that we'd invested in our marriage, in our relationship with each other and with the Lord, were preparing us for the season we're walking into. And then secondly, what's really impactful to me is that the ark did not remove the storm from Noah and his family's life.
Right.
It carried his family through the storm. Incredibly important distinction, right? That God allows us to be carried through them. He doesn't always just up and remove them. And so throughout the story, if your audience is watching, here's the book cover. Yeah. We wanted to find ways to acknowledge that. So each chapter of the book ends in an arc. And it's just, hey, here's a nugget of truth. Here's kind of an anchor. Here's what kept me afloat in this part of the story. Here's something that I needed to know. Here's a nugget of truth. Here's something that I was speaking over myself. And there's an appendix in the back. The book's a couple hundred pages. If you would have handed me that right at the beginning, probably would have not read it, right? Especially early in our grief journey.
Right.
But having the very back where it's the appendix, and I can kind of skim through some of those and see, hey, that one connects with me a little bit better. Then I can go to that chapter and read more on that specific chapter.
Part of what you're talking about here, being sincere and mindful of the words you're speaking over yourself, you're really just taking every thought captive. I mean, this is a 2 Corinthians 10 exercise, really, because if we abandon ourselves to whatever thoughts come to mind and we aren't disciplined in managing our thinking, then, emotions are going to run away with us, and Satan is going to have a heyday. So this is just wise counsel in working at that, because it doesn't happen just by accident. There's discipline in that. So that's a huge gift.
And we are transformed by the renewal of our minds.
Yeah,
right? That
absolutely.
That happens,
Romans 12:2.
That happens over and over and over. This was not just a decision that we made on our back porch to say, hey, we're going to be great. We're going to navigate this wonderfully.
Right.
Of course not. We said, hey, we're going to draw the line in the sand. And this is the line in the sand that we're going to draw. And we're going to say, we are walking through this, and we're going to do this to the best of our ability with God's grace and his mercy every step of the way. but we're going to commit to saying, this is the story that we want to share.
Right.
We get to help write this story.
Yep.
We're not victims here. That
Right.
we're going to take ownership over what we can control, which is only us, right? And we're going to continue to kind of navigate this together as a couple and as individuals with the Lord.
So I think section 3 of the book is the kind of the community manual, community guidelines.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So you were 29 years old in this situation. You were surrounded by people who love you, your parents included, I would assume, and who wanted to help you, but they hadn't been through exactly what you were going through.
Sure.
And so it was probably hard for people to have words or to know what to do to help you. So I would imagine you cover this in this third section. But for the guy, I'm 57 years old. Honestly, my oldest son, their middle child, was born with a severe heart defect. And so he went through some of this. Liam is doing well now. He's 3 years old. He's facing another open heart surgery. But as a dad, I wasn't sure how to help my son.
Sure.
And I wanted desperately to know how to do that. But I've been through a lot of stuff. I've been through different stuff. I hadn't been through that. So speak to the dad, speak to the mentor, speak to the advisor who's seeking to encourage Matthew Efird with this diagnosis, who not only has to navigate that for himself, but also love and lead his wife and prepare a son, your older son. Yeah. It's a challenge to explain to him what's going to happen.
Sure.
So how could someone help you in that situation in a meaningful and godly way that would be honoring to the Lord and helpful to you?
Yeah, so I had men in my life that showed up. You know, yeah. I have the opportunity to go and travel the country now and share faith-based and corporate retreats where, you know, a keynote at conferences. And this is part of the framework that I teach, really from an empathetic leadership, if it's not a directly faith coordination. But the connection is, you know, you look at Job's life again, right? Job goes through intense suffering. He has these great friends that show up. They sit with him, they grieve with him, and then they open their mouth. They try to tell Job what to do and how to feel and how to interact with God, and it all falls apart, right?
Yeah.
The first part of that's really good. The latter part of that's really poor. So what I saw modeled in my life that I have now in turn done in other men's life is I'm just going to show up. I'm going to consistently show up. So for me, as Matthew, what that looked like for me, I had men that would call me and say, "Hey, Matthew, I understand that you're navigating this journey. I want you to know I always want to hear about Noah, always. Mm-hmm. I'm going to ask you how you're doing. I'm going to engage with you on conversations, not to try to get gossip about you, but just so you know, I just want you to know I care.
Yeah,
I'm not going to try to tell you what to do or how to feel. I want to show up. So we're going to go to lunch, and I'm going to bring you with me to lunch. We're going to go golf. I'm going to bring you with me to go golf. We're going to go hunt. I'm going to bring you with me to go hunt. We're going to go to the football game. I'm going to bring you with me to go to the football game, right? We're going to get coffee. I'm going to bring you with me to go get coffee. I'm going to come alongside you and give you my presence. We have this innate desire as men to be fixers.
Right.
And then we go through situations in our life where we can't fix anything. And then we feel like, well, then I've got to say something. And I've got to say the right thing to make them feel better. And rarely is that actually true. What we learned in our life and what we try to help share with others is really what that person needs. They need you.
Yeah.
They just want you. Grief is isolating. Grief is lonely. They don't want to be lonely. They want the freedom to talk if they want to talk, or just be if they want to be. So when men pulled me aside, when men brought me to things, they said, "Hey, we want to know about Noah. This is a safe place to talk about Noah." You don't have to have well-articulated ideas and thoughts. They can be scary to the outside world, like this is a safe place to share. But also, if you just want to talk about Georgia football, we can talk about Georgia football all day long, right?
Right.
We can do that. That is okay. So part of the framework I talk about is show up, listen, and then deploy. So we really had men and women in mine and Hannah's life that showed up for us. They listened, so they asked better questions. They were much quicker to ask before offering advice. They just wanted to hear from us. They wanted us communicating out to them.
Yeah.
And then one thing that we've learned to do is we've learned to ask for forgiveness rather than permission to extend generosity. See, I think there's such a fear that we carry that I'm going to do the wrong thing. It's paralysis by analysis, right? We don't know what to do, so we don't do anything. And yet that's not really helpful. So things that were helpful for us, hey, come cut the grass. Just cut the grass. Take the trash out. Have the house cleaned, right? Pressure wash the house. Don't destroy the house, but pressure wash it. If they've got other kids, this is something that we find for ages of kids of all ages. You know, a lot of times when a sibling is going through a genetic or a terminal diagnosis, the remaining kids, the other kid, the older brother, younger sister, whoever that may be, they get lost in translation a lot.
Yeah.
Because all of the focus is on this one, understandably. We had dear friends that came alongside us and say, hey, once a week, we want to come get Walker. Now, these are people we knew. These are not strangers.
Sure.
But we want to come get Walker and take him with our kids to the park. We're due lunch, we're due park, and we're bring him back in time for nap. How does that sound? Amazing.
Yeah.
Hey, Matthew and Hannah, we're going to the grocery store. I'm making a Costco run. Here's the 4 meals I have planned for you next week. I'm going to order all of these things. Is there anything on there that sounds really bad for your family? Right? The thing that's not helpful is for me to tell you, hey, Mike, I'm so sorry you're going through something. Let me know how I can help. Because what did I just do? I just gave you a job. I just put it back on you. I just said, hey, Mike, you now have a job. All that your job is in the midst of suffering is to navigate through your grief. That's all that your mental capacity allows for. What I can do is I can come alongside you and say, hey, Mike, I'm going to X, Y, and Z, right? I'm gonna have a house cleaner come in and clean the house. I'm gonna have somebody come in and do your laundry that knows you, right? I'm going to bring you food every Monday for the next 5 weeks. I'm just gonna bring you food. I'm gonna take things off of your plate, not try to add them to them. That is advice that I wish I would have had. I wish I would have been able to communicate and articulate. That's advice that I share now.
Yeah.
And we learned recently at an amazing organization that we're part of called While We're Waiting. It's a bereaved parents, Christ-based bereaved parents weekend retreat. Amazing retreats to them all over the country. WhileWe'reWaiting.org. Jill and Brad Sullivan run that organization. Hannah and I are part of it now. And we were talking at that event, and somebody was sharing like all the things that people say that's so hurtful. And one of the ladies spoke up. She said, what I've learned is if you start the sentence with at least, just go ahead and don't say the rest of that. Because, Mike, I heard things like, at least you can have more kids. It's true. It's not helpful. Yeah. At least he's with God. That is true. It's not helpful. At least put in the blank, right? Starting it in that way, what I learned is it's a lot safer for me to ask questions than to try to tell somebody how to feel. Because at the end of the day, I've never walked in their shoes. I don't know how they feel. Our stories, we were designed in community for community, right? We're designed in a triune God. We're make man in our image.
That's right.
The Father, the Son, the Holy Ghost. Like we were designed in that. We were designed to be in community. We're supposed to be connected to one another. That's what is a beautiful thing as people, as image bearers of God. We can use our story to connect with other people. We don't do that to shine the spotlight on us. It's a connection with them. We do that through asking better questions. And I have learned I love to talk about my son Noah. Wrote a book about him, right? I travel the country and speak about him. I love my son. I love all my sons. But all of my sons are still here except for Noah. Mm-hmm. And so that absence in my life, when somebody asks me, hey, will you tell me about Noah? It's not a difficult question. It's not a hard question. It's not a question that I avoid. It's not a question that I hope somebody doesn't ask. I actually long for somebody to ask that. So I've just learned that when I know of someone who's gone through a loss, a parent, a spouse, a sibling, a child, I love to get them to, will you tell me about them? I didn't know them. I'd love to know about them. And that's just a really sweet way to offer that person the platform to share part of their story.
Well, that's huge. So I hear two core pieces of advice here. The first is I love to ask forgiveness, not permission, to practice generosity and hospitality here. And most people want to practice the giving of wisdom like Job's friends did, or the instruction, problem solving. And so practice generosity and hospitality. And then the other big piece of advice was to ask questions and don't make statements, ask questions. And so those are just two huge pieces of encouragement for folks who could walk beside someone in helpful ways. I know we're at time here, so I want to be careful about that. Where can folks get your book and learn more about you and your ministry? And you've mentioned the other ministry as well for grieving parents. So give those links and information again, if you will.
Sure. So MatthewEfird.com. So it's EFIRD as in David. It's like bird, but EF. MatthewEfird.com. It's all of my stuff. The book is Even Though We Will. You can find that on Amazon. You can find that on our website, eventhough-we-will.com. It's got some information about our foundation, different organizations that we're part of. I'd be honored to talk and connect and share any way that I can help. Would be honored to.
Well, I appreciate that. And I'm grateful that we've connected. We've talked a little bit about conference stuff. There may be a time when I could get you to come to Richmond and share with some folks. Would love to be able to continue the conversation. There's so much more here, honestly, to unpack. And folks, I would encourage you to, if this story in any way resonates with you, because it's your own story is similar, or you know someone who's walking through something like this, Matthew's book could be an incredible gift for them. And it might be something that you need to read specifically so you're equipped and prepared to walk alongside someone. This is a type of thing that I wish I had read as a dad of a son who was walking through a difficult diagnosis, certainly not a terminal diagnosis at this point, but one that was very complicated and continues to be. So, Matthew, thank you for your time. Thank you for your faithfulness. Part of what I love here, you said that at one time you were a bivocational pastor, so there's clearly a pastor's heart in the body of a businessman and a motivational and encouraging speaker here, and so that shines through to the Lord's glory. So
I appreciate that a lot. Yeah, we've been very blessed. God, we can continue to say that we serve a good God, and that's right. We serve a good God.
You know, the podcast that I recorded just before this, when the guy was talking about a series of events in his life, and he said, I've done all these things. I was a preacher's son. I went to Bible college. I did all these things, served overseas. And he reached a particular point in his life. He said, I really didn't know that Jesus could be this good. And so even in the midst of the storm, we learn more and more about how good our God is.
Amen.
And so
that he is.
I'm grateful for that testimony. Well, Matthew, thanks for being with us. I'm sure folks will be reaching out to your website and maybe to you personally, but we're grateful for your time here. So thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
Well, folks, thank you for joining us for another episode of the Noble Man Podcast. We are grateful to have you as subscribers and friends. Take a moment to like and subscribe or even comment on the podcast. That would be a gift to us and maybe a blessing to someone else who needs to hear this. Please share it with them, and we'll look forward to catching up with you next week with another guest that's going to help us help you disciple men through your local church. So God bless you, folks. Take care.